Going to pull up our play of the week from last week. So if you remember, it was down at the bottom. We're looking at the tackles. So I'm going to play it again. We're looking at the left and the right tackle. And the question was illegal block below the waist or legal. So legal came up the winner at 59%. Compared to illegal at 41%. So now, but what I want to do is I'm going to get out of the PowerPoint because I want to break. Well, before we do that, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint because I want to talk a little bit about the free blocking zone and illegal blocks below the waist in the free blocking zone before we go back to the play. So we're all on the same page here. Here is the free blocking zone. It's 4 yards to the left or the right of the ball, 3 yards ahead and behind the ball. And here it's depicted here. You can see it on both the picture and the graphic. But the thing is, the picture doesn't do it justice, and we'll get to that in a minute. So here it is. Now, one thing I'm gonna say on this, that these slides are excerpts from our Intro to Football Officiating course, and we produced that course a few months ago, and it's gotten a lot of positive responses. But I did notice something today on these slides, which I thought was kind of funny. When I built the slides, I don't know if nobody's really said anything about it, but the yard lines, it's not 5, it's 6 yards. If you look at the numbers, if you look at the total yardage, so don't say, hey Tim, that's a 6-yarder. I know it's messed up, but it's still going to show us exactly what we need to for our free blocking zone. 3 yards on one side of the ball, 3 yards on the other side of the ball, 4 yards laterally, left and right here. So just know that. I know there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Don't worry about that. That was something I noticed later. I gave him an extra yard. But for the free blocking zone, this is exactly how it's supposed to be, okay? 3 and 3, 4 and 4. So let's go back to our slides so we now know this is how the free blocking zone is defined. And in order for the free blocking zone to exist, the ball must be in the zone. Once the ball leaves the zone, the free blocking zone no longer exists. So you can have on those arrows, either way, defense, offense, both, if everybody's on the line of scrimmage, an initial contact with the snap is below the waist. This is fine. It's got to be immediate. With the snap, below the waist. These 3 engagements would be legal. Now, in our next slide, these 3 engagements would also be legal because it's one adjacent, and both players are on the line of scrimmage in the zone at the snap. As long as this contact is immediate with the snap, these would be legal engagements as well. Now our next one, this is defense, offense. You can see in either direction, but only the offensive players are on the line of scrimmage at the snap. The defensive players are not. So even though they're in the free blocking zone, they are not on the line of scrimmage. So they are restricted from blocking below the waist, whether it's the defense or the offense. Now you can still have a block in the back if the ball is in the zone, but for our purposes of talking about block below the waist, these players are restricted. They would not be able to legally block below the waist. Now here's this one, looks a little familiar. Maybe we'll get more into this one. But you can see that the defensive player starts at the snap on the line of scrimmage, but is outside of the free blocking zone. So since this player has lined up outside the free blocking zone, the defensive player is restricted from blocking below the waist. And he's also restricted from being blocked below the waist, whether it be from the tackle or whether it be from the tight end across from him, because it's outside of the free blocking zone. So this is a little different than some other rules. So just know that some other if you happen to work college, they look at this a little differently. But in high school, it specifically says that both players need to be in the zone on the line of scrimmage at the snap for them to be not restricted from an immediate block below the waist. So just keep that in mind. One last slide here. Well, this is just kind of a culmination of what everybody can do. So left, if you look at the first two here, 1, 2, they're good to block below the waist. The middle one, nope, cannot block below the waist. The one to the right, in between the two bigger arrows, they're eligible. They're not restricted to block below the waist. But the one on the end there, the defender, who is not on the line of scrimmage, cannot block below the waist. So understand that. On the line of scrimmage, at the snap, immediate. These two players would not be, or three players I should say, would not be eligible at any point during the down to block below the waist because they are not meeting the requirement of being in the free blocking zone on the line of scrimmage and for their block to occur. I guess one of them could occur at the snap, but they're not meeting the other obligation to that. So that's kind of a graphical representation of the free blocking zone and how a player is restricted this year with the rule in regards to when they can block below the waist. So we're going to go back to our play so you can kind of see exactly how it looks in real time instead of, in a graphical sense. You can see with normal splits, our tackle and our guard, our center, guard, and tackle. Normal splits would be in the free blocking zone. These 5 players are in the free blocking zone. You can see they've got their normal splits because remember, we're 4 yards this way and 4 yards this way. So it looks about 4 yards. I think these players do qualify as being in the free blocking zone on the line of scrimmage at the snap. So that's the still. That's the first still. So now we know that from looking at the still that they're good to go. That they're starting out legal. Now what happens after that we can talk about. But we know that we're at least starting with them in a position to where they would be considered, I don't know, for lack of a better term, eligible to block below the waist. All right, so now here is the still of what happened after the snap, directly after the snap. This player went this way. This player went this way. So initially, I would say, based off of the rule and based off of the definition of what the free blocking zone is and who is eligible to block below the waist by being in the free blocking zone and their block occurring against a player who is also on the line of scrimmage and in the free blocking zone. These would not qualify against that because those defensive players, if you remember our first picture, they were outside of that 4-yard lateral limit. So they are restricted from either being blocked below the waist or blocking below the waist. Now looking at this picture by itself, it's a little out of context because if you just got this shot and you see that, you're saying, well, yeah, we probably, if this wasn't called, we may have missed something here. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the actual play again and explain why the reason I think that this was a 50-50 proposition in regards to calling this a block below the waist or not calling it a block below the waist. So going wide on it here, you can see everybody misses. So the tackles miss. They're attempting to block below the waist, but both defenders step out of it, step around it. Okay? So the definition of an illegal block below the waist is contact. It starts with the word contact. Well, you can make the argument that the contact didn't really happen there. So I can understand why, from a judgment standpoint, maybe people said, well, yeah, they didn't qualify, they were restricted, but I'm not having a foul here because I think both players whiffed. If that's your judgment, then that's your judgment. But it better be based off of the rule. And how, see, we talk a lot here about judgment and rules and how we have to merge them. And in addition to philosophy. So we have to pull in philosophy, judgment, and rules, and that's how philosophy helps determine our judgment. And if we look at a play like this and we say, well, we know that those players were restricted, but we passed on it because we didn't feel that that there really wasn't contact, that both defensive players stepped around it, fine. Then that's your judgment. If you were on the 49% side or whatever and said, hey, I am calling this a foul, you'd be supported as well if you believe that there was enough contact that warranted the foul based off of those players being lined up outside of the free blocking zone and not qualifying or being restricted from being blocked below the waist. So just when you have an explanation to a coach or a team or whatever, or an assigner or whoever it might be about this type of a block and why you may have passed on it, know why you passed on it. Because if you just didn't see it, then it's like, uh-oh, do you know the rule? Do you know where you're supposed to be looking? Mechanics, blah, blah, blah. It starts opening up. You start peeling back a lot more layers that maybe you don't need to peel back.